Hello everybody. This time I'm about to go training. Before I've been training, but I thought because I missed yesterday, didn't do one for you yesterday, I'll get one in before I go training. So I'm going to deal with a couple of questions. And they're from, one's from Sandwell Stud. Did you ever wrestle in any of the German and Austrian tournaments for Otto Wanz and CWA? Second question comes from Glenn R. Was Canada sorted? Who did you drop the belt to? Well, I have talked about Canada in the past, but this time I'm going to fill in a lot of the blanks so as, we don't have to keep revisiting it. So we'll get to that and I'll give you more in depth about it. So we'll start at the beginning, shall we? As I've said before, and it's the German idea. Well, once again, I've already said to you in the past that going abroad was very difficult for Kendo and the mask and everything else. And these German tournaments, really, you had to commit to go there for some time, sometimes weeks on end, and live in a caravan or something like that. I didn't want to do that. I suppose, although I'm a full-time professional wrestler, it's not my only interest in life. I've always been, ever since meeting the Count, as I told you not so long ago, entrepreneurial. So I've always had other aspects, other what you might call irons in the fire. Well, as those irons were eating up, I couldn't afford to be away for weeks, months on end. It just wasn't possible. Some of the lads were full-time wrestlers, and a lot of the lads, to be honest, I mean, the ones that ended up there, although they were full-time professionals here, they didn't get that good a wage. They could just about live on it, I suppose, if they were sensible and careful. I didn't rely on wrestling to make my money. I was always much more agile in buying and selling anything I could get my hands on, really. So I didn't need to go. I didn't want to go. So I never did. It never appealed to me at all. So really, I suppose that really answers that question. Now, moving on to the second question. Was Canada sorted? Who'd you drop the belt on? Or to? Right. Well, I'm going to try and explain Canada in a more general sort of way. How I came to be there. Because I've just said to you, I didn't like going abroad. But then I commit to going to Canada for nearly 6 months. So why did I do that? I did it really because George wanted to go. Keith Hart, who is the second eldest, I believe, Keith, he came over here wrestling for Joint Promotions. And part of his sort of remit was to find wrestlers that he could send over to Canada for his dad. And he dropped on us at a show, and I think he spoke to George, not me at the time, about going out for his dad to this Canadian thing. George spoke to me about it, and I wasn't too keen, because once again, I'd had all these other experiences. I did actually, just to recap a little bit, I did actually wrestle in France for about a week and a half. I went over there with Judo Allays, would you believe? I hated every minute of it. And I also wrestled in Switzerland at the same time, because they're very close together. I wasn't happy about it. It's a pain in the arse, to be honest. As you know already, I did a few shows in Spain, but that was a little bit easier because I wasn't Kendo out there. But other than that, I never really went abroad except to Canada, which I did spend a certain amount of time in, so I'll carry on with that. So George wanted to go to Canada, and I was saying, no, it's a bit difficult, this, that and the other. Day. I've got this and I've got that and I've got this. But he could be quite mithering if he got something into his head. As you'll probably find out as we go through this series, there's more about George to come. So eventually he talks me into it. So I think Keith was over here for, I can't remember how long, but he didn't come and go quickly because Canada's a long way off, isn't it? In those days, there wasn't so many commercial jets as there are now. I mean, we actually flew out on a 747 and came back on a 707, I think it was, and flew back on the very early 747 from Toronto. Anyway, we decided we were going to go. So the arrangements are made. Stu sends us tickets are out. I can't remember exactly what the process was, but George, being more inclined to want to go, he dealt with most of it. So we go and we get there and we met at the airport. I'm pretty certain we met at the airport by Keith. Picked us up in a car and took us to an apartment in Calgary where Lenny Hurst was already there. Lenny Hurst was a guy from London and he was already in this apartment and we were going to share it with him. I think there was about quite a big apartment. It had a main sitting room, a bathroom. I think it had 3 bedrooms because George and I would be in separate rooms and Lenny had one as well. So it's quite a big apartment. It had an underground car park because after I'd been there a while, I acquired a car. So we had our own transport, Chrysler. Anyway, we arrived there and Keith's with us. And Keith then invites us to go up to the big house. And we'd only just arrived, only been there an hour or so, or something like that. And we sort of declined the offer. You know, you've been on the plane and on the road, it's a long journey. So we said, no, it's not a very good idea. We wanted to settle down. And Keith almost said to us, you know, you won't get invited again. It's quite a privilege to get invited up to the big house. And we sort of dismissed it because, you know, one house is much like another house, isn't it? We didn't realise it was a shrine. But anyway, we declined. Keith goes, and within an hour, who arrives but Stu Hart? I think Keith was still in tow. Stu Hart comes in, and I'd never met him before. He announces himself, and he's got that, Kendo Nagasaki. And he's looking me up and down like a piece of meat. I thought, his eyes are everywhere. I think he's actually weighing you up. Not as a wrestler at that time, more of a victim, I would say. Because I had heard stories. When we decided we were going to go, of course, we didn't say one day we're going and we're going the next. There was probably 3 or 4 weeks between deciding to go and actually going. So I'm getting a bit of information around the job, what to expect, what this thing's like. So I got the message that Stu Hart was a guy that tried to con people into going to his house, and then he would, let's call it, screw them if he could. He could get away with it. He'd get you on the mat, or get you some pretense to get on the mat, and then he would, depend what level you were at. If you were somebody who didn't know what you were doing, he'd just go on there and do his job, which was quite easy with greenhorns. But somebody had a bit announced about it. He thought, oh, this guy might be a wrestler, might know a bit of something, because he knew I was a Billy Robinson candidate, wasn't I? I'd trained in the same place as Billy. That type of person, he used to try and get on the mat, and then he'd come in, and I'll tell you how it happened. Anyway, he comes and says hello, goes away. We get the invitation to go to the house again. We decline again. No, don't bother. So I think I've been there probably about 3 weeks, 2.5 to 3 weeks. And Keith then, becoming quite friendly, says, could I come and, show him a few things? Me go and show him. And I'm invited to the house, to the gym. Not to the house to see Stu, but to the gym. So I said, all right then. So I go to the gym and I'm going to teach this. I mean, I think Keith was probably maybe 21 or 20. Bruce was the next one, and Bruce was about 21 or 22 then on. And Smith was the eldest. Keith was the second one, I think. No, Keith was the third one, sorry. So he's probably between 19 and 21. I don't quite know what age he was. So I go up to show him a few things, don't I? We hadn't been down there long in this Now, what they call the dungeon was actually the laundry as well. You know, it's quite, the ceiling's not that high. It's very subterranean. It's more like a cellar, really. And they call it the dungeon. Or it became known as the dungeon. I don't quite know if it was a dungeon when I was there. But there's washing machines over there, and there was a mat on the floor. And I'd only been there about 5-6 minutes, and who comes wandering down? Because you come down the staircase. But Stu, Mr. Screw you if you're not careful. So he comes on and said, "Hey, Kendo, maybe I could show you a few tricks, and if you just get down and I'll just demonstrate this hold." And I thought, I haven't been there before, but I've heard about this. And I thought, do I trust this old bugger? And it flashed through my mind, he's the promoter. Do I, tell the promoter to F off? I've only just arrived, haven't I, in a foreign country, and he pays the wages. And it's going through my mind, what do you do? And I thought, no, I'm not going to trust him. So I said to him, all right, Stu, if you want to show me, wrestle it on. Get on the mat, wrestle it on. Show me how you do it. He said, hey, you didn't do that sort of thing now, Kendo. I'm a bit of an old fart, but if you were to just get down on your hands and knees, maybe I could just... And I said, no. Show me how you get it on. Get me down first and then put it on. We can pull round. We can have a pull round. No, I want to do that. So that rang alarm bells, didn't it, straight away? Anyway, he didn't give up straight away. He tried a few times to persuade me it might be a good idea if he showed me something I didn't already know. But I knew what he was trying to do. And in the end, he buggered off. So that's my sort of first introduction to Canada and to Stu and his family. Stu disappears off back up the staircase, I suppose with his tail between his legs, really, because he didn't get what he wanted. But looking back on it all, I can see how people like the Dynamite and his cousin, Davy Boy, would have gone there as greenhorns, really, and Stu would have done this to them. They'd have fallen into the trap. I mean, some time later, because they went over there probably 6 years after I was there. Probably 6 years after I was there. But I don't think Stu would have changed much. He might have got a bit older, but he was still this guy that liked to get people who didn't know what was happening to them. And I've heard tales of people screaming, and you could hear the screams all through the building. I've never witnessed that. I've never been there when anybody screamed, because I've only ever been to his house about 3 times. Twice was to have a meal with him and his wife. That was much later on when I established myself, when Stu realised I wasn't going to be an easy pushover. That's after the Crowfoot thing and all the other things that I've already told you about that went on with our Danny Boy Crowfoot and people like that. So, as I say, he went upstairs, and that was the last. He never tried it again with me. But I'm sure, as I said before, it wouldn't be the last of him trying to do that type of thing. And tales feed back from much later on when he has caught people unawares, or they've thought, well, he's, like I had it in the back of my mind, he's the promoter. He's the man that pays your wages. How much are you going to screw him up? How much are you going to fuck him off? What are you going to do? He's got you trapped. But he never tried to trap people like Gordienko. He never invited George down to the dungeon. George never got an invite because he knew he wouldn't get there. George wouldn't go there, and George wouldn't. If he tried that on with Gordienko would have jumped on him. I didn't, because I'm new in that territory, and I didn't treat him with contempt, which he probably deserved, but I treated him with a certain amount of respect, I suppose, as a promoter. Anyway, to push the story forward and to bring it into context of what's happening now, really, with Sanjay Bagga and the haircut match. As time goes by and I establish my thing with Danny Crawford. We're doing a tag match with Bruce, which is the second eldest. Keith's the third eldest, Smith's the oldest. We're going to do this tag match at Calgary. With him, Bruce and Crawford on one side, George and me on the other. And the idea is going to be that, the loser, and they think that's going to be George, is going to have his hair cut. So that rather builds into what we're doing now. And, I can't remember where George had his hair cut or not, but I can assure you Sanji's having his. Anyway, we're going to do this match. And because Bruce, we call him Little Brucey, let's call him Little Brucey. He was a lad, quite a good-looking young man, with blonde hair, and I think he wore a big cowboy hat and that sort of thing, a bit like a rodeo kid. And he'd gone to school in Calgary. He had lots of friends in Calgary, and it's the first time he's going to be on the television in Calgary. So he wants to sort of make a name for himself, make a thing, go. Although he knows he's not going to beat Kendo, because that's not on the cards, but he wants it to look like Kendo only wins because Kendo goes too far. So Bruce, in his head, thinks it might be a nice idea for him to be bladed, of course, cut, so he could bleed. So he's got some excuse to his friends why he didn't beat me up, or whatever he wanted to do, I don't know. Anyway, he asked me if I would do it. And I said, yeah, I can do that for you. No problem there, young man. So we went into this match with Brucey looking all blonde and perfect, We did the match, and eventually I got him in the corner, and I decided this is the time. So I produced my little instrument, didn't I? And I give him a good cut, quite an adequate one, to be honest. And he was pumping because he was hot and sweaty, and this blood just oozing out everywhere, all over his face, all in his hair, all over the place. Eventually, I took a fall on him or beat him somehow, but he was bloodied up. But that's what he wanted, wasn't it? This lad wanted to go out in a way that was very dramatic for his friends, really for his friends, and his own ego. So we did that, and that's what happened. I'm not sure whether George ran off before the haircut happened. I think he probably did. I don't think Miss Gillette would have had her haircut, not willingly anyway. So we get back in the dressing room, and we were in the same dressing room. Bruce is sitting over there on a bench. The door's back here. I'm there. So Bruce is there. I'm there. Door's here. The door opens, don't it? In walks Mr. Stu Hart. And he stands in the middle of the room. He looks at me and goes, goddamn. And then he looks over his son and he goes, And then he walks over to Bruce and smacks him round the face and says, and keep away from your fucking mother. And out he went. So I thought, well, that's not gone down too well with the boss. I don't think that's what the boss wanted, but the son did. Anyway, that's the sort of character that Stu was. I mean, he was in total control of his, to some extent, with the lads. The lads jumped to his beck and call, really. I think the only one that really challenged him was Smith, and he was the eldest one. And Smith used to get in a lot of trouble with the police for speeding and doing all sorts of... He was a bit... As far as Stu was concerned, Smith was a bit of a pain in the arse. And when I left, because he'd lost his licence, or lost the right to have a car, he bought my car off me and drove my car on my permit to drive. Apparently, I sold him the car. I got good money for the car because he'd lost his right to drive. And he thought, because I'm buggering off, he could be me for a while, I think. Anyway, I sold him the car and all the permits that went with it. I got on the aeroplane and he had the car. But I don't know an awful lot about Smith, but there was always this sort of, he's a bit dodgy, he will bend the rules, not the rules in the wrestling business either. But that's the impression I got from him. Keith was very much his father's lad, you know, he would try and please the old man. And Bruce was the youngest one, and I don't think he tried to please his dad that night, because it didn't seem to. Eventually, of course, George and I came back to the UK, and as I've said before, we could have gone back to Canada or to the States or whatever, but we never did, and that also builds into the first question. I was always far too busy. And of course, as I've said in the previous video, I lost my aunt. It wasn't carelessness, she died, of course. And that really rounds this one off. I don't think I can tell you any more about Canada. Oh, before I do finally go, though, you've asked who I dropped the belt to. Well, as you probably know, when I arrived there, Jeff Ports had the belt. Jeff Ports, right, he's a British wrestler. He dropped the belt on me. We call it drop the belt. That's, you know, you lose to the person. And Jeff went out of the territory, and probably about a week and a half to 2 weeks before I left the territory, Jeff came back. And Stu decided that he was going to be the new champion, so I dropped the belt on him. Now, some people say that he beat me, but he didn't. I got disqualified. So that is a win in a funny sort of way, isn't it? But he didn't. I didn't let anybody get me on the mat 1, 2, 3. I wouldn't do that. My pride is too strong for me to let anybody do that. Not even Mr. Ports. I mean, I'll tell you another story about Jeff later on, because this is Jeff Ports, of course, not Jeff Conley. Because Jeff Ports is a bit of a sort of coward individual, but I'll tell you about it another time. So for now, bye-bye.